Seriously, what a bland and cheap excuse for bread. The manager of the fancy bakery sneered as he crushed our bread in his hand. What did our bread ever do to him? This was the bread my mom poured her heart into baking. The jam oozed out, dripping red onto the floor. Why? I clenched the handles of my wheelchair tightly, trying to hold back the anger rising inside me. If my legs were still like they used to be, I might have punched him. In a twisted way, I guess that's a silver lining. But no matter how I looked at it, I was furious. "Leave now," I said, my voice coming out lower than I expected, even startling myself. The manager seemed a bit taken aback, too. "You think you can intimidate me? Not with those legs." He sneered, glancing down at my wheelchair with disdain. I clenched my teeth. The overcast sky beyond the glaring manager seemed ready to pour any second. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the ground, and I shot upright. "Mom." Panicking, I looked around for Mom. The building swayed violently. This was the biggest earthquake I'd ever experienced in my life. "Mike." Her voice came quickly, and we rushed together to escape outside. The shoe rack toppled over. As I ran behind Mom, I realized it was coming down on me. Before I could react, my legs were pinned beneath it. "Mike." Mom cried out in shock, rushing back toward me. "Just go. Get out of here," I shouted, trying to stop her from coming back. But she returned and desperately pulled at my arm. "It hurts. It hurts." My heel got stuck, and I couldn't pull free. Just then, the storage shed next to the front door made a terrible creaking sound as it began to tilt. "Run." I desperately shoved Mom away. The leaning shed came crashing down onto the front entry where I was lying. After that, I don't remember anything. The last thing I saw was Mom falling back onto the ground. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital. I couldn't remember what had happened, and for a moment I panicked, but there was nothing I could do. I was fully conscious, but my body wouldn't move. As I sat there in a daze, Mom and the doctor came over to me. Mom was sobbing loudly, hugging me tightly, but my body didn't respond. The doctor seemed to be explaining something, but I was so overwhelmingly sleepy. Eventually, I just let go of my consciousness. Ah! I woke up suddenly from a nightmare about an earthquake. I couldn't sit up. Realizing something felt wrong, or rather, trying to sit up, I hesitantly reached my hand toward my thighs. My legs, the ones that had always been there, were gone. A chill ran through me. My legs were gone. Why? How could this happen? All I could feel was the sensation of bandages. I kept checking again and again. My legs, my legs. Fear overwhelmed me, and tears started to flow. Why? Why are my legs gone? Why? A nurse rushed in at the sound of my shouting. The lights came on, and as the nurse explained everything, I listened through my tears. Why did this have to happen to me? I thought it would have been better if I had just died back then. How am I supposed to live like this now? Despair crashed over me like a wave. I went to sleep crying, hoping that when I woke up, I'd be back in my old home. "Hey, are you even listening?" The voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Remembering my legs, I realized I had been a bit lost in my own head. Even though I thought I'd moved on, That moment was still a deep scar. Leave now. I repeated the same words. I had no intention of talking to someone who crushed our bread in their hands. That bread was baked so someone could say, "This is delicious." It must have been about a year ago. That's when the fancy bakery opened right in front of our shop. Mom and I weren't worried since we knew our customers were completely different. We were just impressed, saying things like, "What an amazing bakery." But the manager of that bakery didn't see it the same way. He seemed to see us as a threat, constantly throwing insults our way, like, "Still hanging on," or "Why don't you just give up and close already?" with that miserable excuse for bread. I'm sure he found us annoying. And today, he finally crossed the line. I was shocked, and more than anything, I was furious. But just as he tried to say something else to me, a regular customer, a woman, raised her voice. "How could you be so cruel? Do you even know who you've just made an enemy of?" She said this, tears welling up in her eyes. A few minutes later, a luxury car pulled up, and a beautiful woman in a wheelchair stepped out, tears in her eyes. "This is awful. Apologize right now." That woman was Nancy Jones, a famous wheelchair performer. What? A group of reporters followed behind Nancy. That's right. I'd completely forgotten that Nancy mentioned she might drop by for a feature interview today. She had laughed and said, "Because this is my absolute favorite bread." Since it wasn't a bad idea, I had gladly agreed. The manager, confused by the situation, finally snapped back to reality and shouted, "Turn off those cameras. Who gave you permission to film?" "That would be Taylor from this shop." A staff member replied calmly. Of course, we had already informed our customers that there might be filming today. One of our regulars even said, "Oh no, I need to put on makeup," and arrived with a much more colorful look than usual. And right in the middle of all this, the manager barged in and crushed our bread in front of everyone. But the footage has already been streaming. A staff member said, leaving the manager pale-faced. "What? We didn't stop the camera when you crushed the bread. Honestly, we didn't think it would escalate like that." Although the cameras had finally been turned off, the damage was done. The footage had already spread online. "Delete it. Do it now," the manager screamed. But things didn't go the way he wanted. The video of him crushing the bread was already going viral as a shocking incident. Comments poured in like, "Found the bakery of the guy who crushed the bread," and "A bakery that wastes food. No thanks." People were sharing the clip, with others chiming in, "I'm boycotting it. No matter how good their bread is, I don't want to buy from someone who disrespects food. I used to buy bread from here with such a happy feeling. But after seeing this, no matter how delicious the bread is, it doesn't taste good anymore." Voices like this caused the bakery's reputation to crumble. "What the? This can't be happening." The manager, pale and panicked, watched helplessly as the negative reviews about his store spread like wildfire on his phone. An employee from across the street came running, saying, "The phone won't stop ringing." And the chaos continued until he was called back to his shop. "Are you okay?" Nancy asked me as I stood there, stunned by everything that had happened in such a short time. I nodded and said I was fine. She was a famous wheelchair performer, but before her injury, she had been a ballet dancer who competed in major competitions. Like me, she lost her legs in a disaster and fell into despair about her future. Around the same time, I stumbled upon wheelchair basketball, which helped me find the will to live again. Even without legs, people could achieve incredible things. It showed me that we can rise again. That realization was like a ray of light piercing through the darkness. From there, I worked hard on rehabilitation, regained my daily life, and even started participating in wheelchair sports. Since we had been hospitalized at the same place, Nancy had seen my journey and told me later, I felt like I'd been thrown into hell and that God was telling me to die. But I realized that wasn't true. Surviving, even like this, has meaning. It still hurts when I watch ballet. I feel pathetic for saying that, but I've decided to do what I can. She said those words and began her wheelchair performances. Since she had been an athlete, Nancy's dedication and discipline were awe-inspiring to everyone around her. Watching her push through rehab and strength training with clenched teeth inspired me to give it my all as well. We became good friends, supporting and motivating each other. Her performances truly gave hope to people. She even became a candidate to perform at the Paralympics. With numerous international shows, she's now in high demand. But whenever she comes back home, she always stops by our bakery. I love seeing the satisfied look on her face when she enjoys our bread. Serves him right. One of our regulars huffed, "Excuse me." I asked, "That bakery manager, bad deeds always catch up with you." She said, pouting, "This shop is loved by everyone in the community." During the earthquake disaster, our bakery's ovens were untouched, so we baked bread to distribute to those in need. Since our bread was baked in wood-fired ovens, we didn't need electricity to make it. Many of our regulars fell in love with my mom because, even while worrying about me possibly dying, she still baked bread for free to help the struggling people around us. She's so strong. Even though she was definitely worried sick about Mike, she'd just say, "It depends on his strength now," and hand out freshly baked bread. I've never had bread as good as hers. Or, I saw her quietly shed a tear while watching the oven flames. But she'd still say, "If this bread can ease their hearts, even a little, and hand it out warm, I'll keep buying bread from here for the rest of my life." These are the kinds of stories our customers would secretly share with me. Mom always brushed it off, saying, "If I don't keep busy, I'll overthink things." But it's clear that my mom is incredibly strong. To treat Mike like that, he'd better be ready to face every woman in this area. The regular continued, adding, "But he ended up digging his own grave." Yeah, that's probably the scariest thing of all. To me, they're the last people you'd want to make enemies of. That said, I doubt he'll ever mess with our shop again. That's how I felt at the time. That day, Nancy had just returned from an overseas performance, and we decided to go out to eat a rare treat for both of us. It's not always easy to feel comfortable dining out among able-bodied people, so I was genuinely happy to share a meal together like this. On the way back, as I was driving the car equipped with hand controls to drop off Nancy, she suddenly said, "Stop." We were on a bridge, and I wondered what was going on. There, standing on the bridge, was the manager of the fancy bakery. He looked much thinner, with hollow cheeks and an overall worn-down appearance. After everything that had happened, the bakery had gone out of business, and he'd already closed it down. Honestly, part of me felt like he got what he deserved. But seeing him now, no longer well-dressed, with a missing button on his shirt, standing aimlessly on the bridge, I realized my feelings were wrong. He looked utterly drained, with lifeless eyes. "Are you okay?" Nancy called out to him from inside the car. The manager turned toward us with those empty eyes and leaned forward, attempting to jump off the bridge. "Wait!" Nancy shouted loudly to stop him, but he didn't stop. "No!" Her scream echoed as the manager fell onto the inner side of the bridge. I had grabbed his legs and pulled him back. At that moment, I was glad for all the training I had done. "Are you okay?" Breathing heavily, I asked him. "Why?" The manager's voice trembled. Honestly, I wasn't sure why either. But I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Even if I keep living, it's all. He broke into tears as he spoke. He sobbed as he confessed about the debt he was left with. How even though his face wasn't visible, his actions had become known to those around him, and how it had spiraled out of control. He said there was no hope left in his life. It was more intense than I had imagined. For the first time, I understood what he meant when he said that strangers hurling malice at him had become a daily occurrence, making him terrified of people. Live. I wasn't sure why those words came out of my mouth, but I knew dying like this was wrong. Sure, I hadn't forgotten what he did to me, but this wasn't the way to resolve anything. Live and start over. I repeated myself. He looked up at me. "Why, I've done terrible things to you. Then live and make amends to me," I replied, looking straight at him as he stared back in surprise. At this point, there was no turning back. "It's okay. Look at me. I'm living just fine even without my legs. So, start over and live. You can do it. Besides, you've got all your limbs, don't you?" When I said that, the manager froze for a moment, then slowly nodded with a faint, startled expression on his face. "If it's you telling me that, then," the manager said with a bitter smile. His eyes had regained their spark, and it seemed he no longer had the will to die. "I'll try to start over, and I'll make sure to repay you for today's kindness." With those words, he stood up. "Oh, by the way, could you help me get back into the driver's seat?" I said, grinning. He chuckled, and I couldn't help but laugh along with him. After a moment of surprise, he burst into laughter as well. "You've got mail." Mom called out one day, handing me a letter. It was from the manager. The video had become so infamous in USA that he had obtained a work visa and moved abroad to start fresh. I genuinely admired how he had declared bankruptcy and truly started over from scratch. It seemed he had struggled at first, unfamiliar with everything, but he eventually found his footing. The letter included a photo of him holding bread in a rundown bakery, one even shabbier than ours, smiling warmly with the locals. He had written over and over about how happy he was that people around him enjoyed eating the bread he made. Seeing that, I felt a warm sense of happiness. At the end of the letter, he had written, "Please send my regards to that beautiful lady," which made me blush a little, so he had figured it out. "Mind your own business," I muttered to myself. I haven't even had the chance to confess my feelings yet, you know. But yeah, he's working hard. I should work hard too. That's what I thought as I looked up. The sky was bright blue, and the sunlight poured down, touching every living thing.